Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing the 32nd film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So, I suppose I should probably talk about the previous Guardians movies before I get to this one. The first Guardians movie I thought was a really damn good movie. Had great action, adventure, great character, and honestly, the villain was kind of average, but he had imposing presence, and again, I did like how it further added to the Infinity Saga arc, and it overall felt like a very enjoyable film that brought together this band of misfits and turned them into heroes. The second film, I thought was a very good character piece for Peter as he met his father and essentially had to deal with the whole nature versus nurture thing and figuring out who his real family is. It was a lot bigger of a movie, it had a lot more had a lot more emotional moments to it, and overall, it just felt like a damn good time. So, when it came down to the third film, this one was a kind of a roller coaster for getting off of the ground. Mostly because of just kind of everything that had been going on with it. Basically, if you have not been keeping track of the MCU at this point, after Infinity War, people have been feeling that the MCU has been kind of hitting fatigue, which I might have showcased in these vlogs, but then again, I'm kind of biased in certain regards, so what do I know? While I personally do enjoy the films to various degrees, though even I'll admit some are better than others, even recently, the films kind of have him hitting some form of fatigue, especially with all the Marvel related material that's being released, both in terms of shows and movies. So, yeah, people were kind of feeling some fatigue when this movie came out, which was not helped by the fact with behind the scenes stuff. As before the film was even produced, James Gunn had been briefly fired from Marvel because of some old tweets that he had made years prior coming out, and let's just say it didn't paint him in a good light. Thankfully, he was hired back as the fans and even the casting crew vouched for him, so he still managed to get it back. But, like I said, kind of a bit of a roller coaster. But the film was still being greenlit, and people were still excited about it, myself included. After all, the first two Guardians films were great, and this one was supposed to be advertised as the final film in the Guardians trilogy. And basically, it kind of made you wonder, where would they go from here? What is the big final ride? How are they going to end things? Is it going to be an emotional roller coaster? Is it going to be big and epic? Is it going to be character driven? Well, that's what we're here to find out. As today, we're going to be taking a look at Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and few things before I start talking about it. One, I did see the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special prior to seeing this, and I might talk about it a little here and there. It's not very much important to understanding the plot, but some things that occurred in that are mentioned in Volume 3, so I will kind of be referring back to that occasionally, but very occasionally. Two, I have a dog here, and she may end up getting rowdy and might interrupt me at certain points, so apologies if I have to pause the vlog for any variety of reasons, most of which might be dog-related. And three, spoilers abound, people. At the time that I'm recording this vlog, the film has only been out in theaters for 2 weeks, so if you haven't seen the film yet and want to go in unspoiled, turn away now because I'm not going to be holding anything back. I'm going to be revealing all the major plot details, how the film goes, all the big twists, the big turns, how the film ends, and so on and so forth, so oh yeah, proceed with caution. Also, I have notes which I might be referring to at certain points, so just a heads up if I just stop and just start searching through this for any variety of reasons. So, there you go. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's get to the plot summary. So, where are we now in terms of continuity? Well, the Guardians have actually set up shop. Yeah, after Infinity War and Love and Thunder, the Guardians actually wound up buying Nowhere, something that was actually talked about in the holiday special, and put simply, they fixed it up. After Thanos pretty much wrecked the place, they've been hard at work just repairing it, rebuilding, making it into something more civilized, less of a dive and more of a regular town. They've set up a little headquarters in the center of the place, and because this is the Guardians' home base now, they're kind of like its protectors. Also, technically, they're the legal owners of it now. So there you go. And they're not alone in that regard, as we saw in Thor: Love and Thunder. One of the former Ravagers is actually working with the Guardians now, as he's taken Yondu's little fin thing and is trying to make it work for himself. And this guy is Kraglin. Sorry, I'm referring to the notes because I kept forgetting his name. But he's working along it too, and remember Cosmo, the space dog who made cameos in the first and second Guardians films? She's a full-blown character now. She made her debut in the holiday special, and now she's a regular character here. And yes, Cosmo in the films is a she. This is an intentional choice by James Gunn because the dog that Cosmo was based on was a female dog, so he kind of wanted to do the same thing with Cosmo, so there you go. But there's also another little thing with Cosmo. She has psychic powers. She's super intelligent, can live things with her mind, and can actually communicate. Now, in most other iterations, Cosmo communicates telepathically, but this one actually has like a voice that modulator on her spacesuit. So there you go. But bottom line, the Guardians have been rebuilding Nowhere and making it a better place. Unfortunately, the Guardians have kind of also been having some turbulence ever since the last time we saw them. Mostly in regards to Peter, as put simply, he's still not doing well after what happened after Gamora's death in Infinity War. As apparently most nights he pretty much just drinks himself into a stupor and passes out, resulting in one of the Guardians, probably Nebula, bringing him back to his room, and well, he dreams of Gamora. Which, yeah, in the beginning of the movie, when he gets the pass out drunk and Nebula has to bring him back to his room, she does briefly stay with him because he briefly is dreaming of her. And what I like is that she sympathizes. I get it. I like that. It's sweet and it's nice. And put simply, while the Guardians have been wanting to help Peter and trying to get him to move on, well, he hasn't really been listening. He's kind of been shutting out any attempts to help him. And as a result, he's just kind of in an he's hit an emotional roadblock and doesn't really know where to go. And the Guardians, well, they don't know how to help him. They do want to help him, they just don't know how. They don't know what to say, they don't know what to do. It's just kind of a crapshoot at this point. However, that evening things do kind of start going a bit more haywire, as well, as the Guardians decide to just go back to their respective rooms and turn in for the night, well, Nowhere gets a visitor. And that visitor is the MCU debut of the Marvel character Adam Warlock. And okay, yeah. So you remember back in Guardians Volume 2 during one of the credit scenes where the High Priestess of the Sovereign, those gold skin people, if you forgot, had a pod, and she said that she was going to name whatever was in it Adam? Well, that's this guy, Adam Warlock, who is supposed to be this big cosmic / magic Marvel character, and who I only know so much about. I know he was in the comics, he played a big part in the Infinity Gauntlet event comic, and he was apparently part of a team called the Infinity Watch. And that's literally all I know about him. I genuinely do not know a lot about Adam Warlock. When most I've exposed to him is through his connections to the Infinity Gauntlet stuff, and his appearance in the Guardians of the Galaxy video game. Otherwise, yeah, my knowledge is kind of limited in regards to him. So, sorry. But yeah, this is his actual first MCU debut. And he does it as he plans to assault Rocket, as he flies into Nowhere, and he ends up flying straight into Rocket's room and blasts him right through several buildings, which, yeah, when you have a gold guy who is glowing with power and attacks someone in the town and goes through several buildings, naturally it's gonna get it's gonna turn a few heads, and as a result, the Guardians end up suiting up and getting ready to battle him. Unfortunately for them, Adam Warlock's kind of a match for them. As the Guardians go one by one to face Adam, well, they all start getting their asses handed to them. Nebula ends up getting all of her limbs broken. Don't worry, she gets better as her limbs are mostly robotic. Groot tries wrapping up in his roots, which results in Adam vaporizing most of his body to the point where he's just a head. Kraglin, god dang it, I keep forgetting his name. Sorry. Kraglin tries using the fin thing, but sadly he's having problems controlling it, so when he tries shooting the arrow at him, all it does is knock against him, and Adam thinks that someone just threw something at him. And sadly for Rocket, while Rocket does try to create he gets blasted into a shot full of spare parts before he can assemble him into a weapon to go face Adam. Adam blasts him again into those parts and severely injures him, with Mantis trying to go in and try to calm Adam down by touching his head, but all that results in is him grabbing her wrist and snapping it. Thankfully, Drax is able to save the pair as he rushes in and manages to get into a one-on-one with Adam. But again, it's a one-sided fight. Drax is not a match for Adam, and it just turns into a one-sided beatdown as Adam literally has him on the ground and just keeps punching him over and over. Thankfully, Nebula has managed to recover from the assault that Adam gave her. And one thing that's special about Nebula in this movie, she's got a new arm, one that's made of nanotechnology, which she can forge into whatever shape she wants, including a sword, which she uses to stab Adam Warlock in the back as he's distracted with Drax's beatdown. This ultimately does not kill him, but it does hurt him, and he does not. And put simply, it hurts him enough that he's forced to retreat and leave nowhere. Unfortunately, though, the damage he wrought cannot just be erased, and as a result, Rocket is still in critical condition. Of course, throughout the commotion, Peter did get woken up and rushed to the scene, which I think he took part in the battle, but don't quote me on that. I was also taking notes when I saw this film tonight, so I might have forgotten some things. But bottom line, he runs into the shop where Rocket was attacked, and well, he's not doing so well. As such, Mantis tells Peter that to get some med packs, which are supposed to be these literal packs that apply to a wound will heal it instantly, which Mantis showcases as she applies it to her broken wrist, and it just heals back up no problem. But when they take one of the med packs and try to apply it to Rocket's wound, instead he starts foaming at the mouth and starts convulsing, resulting in having to take the med pack off. So, yeah, the Guardians are a bit confused as to what the heck's going on. As such, they end up taking Rocket back to their ship and end up doing a scan of his body, and it turns out he has a kill switch in his chest. And basically, while the kill switch is mostly inactive and can't really do anything, if anyone tries tampering with him or tries applying a med pack, the kill switch will activate and will fry Rocket's systems, which means that they're kind of in a catch-22. On the one hand, if they apply the med pack, they'll be killing Rocket, but if they don't apply it, then he will eventually succumb to his wounds, and he will die, with Nebula giving him a diagnosis of 48 hours before he kicks the bucket. As such, the Guardians, well, they're kind of stuck. They're kind of dead in the water. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They do suggest that maybe they could get something to override the kill switch and ultimately shut it down. But unfortunately, they don't know where Rocket's from, since they kind of need to know that in order to get the kill switch kill code. Well, they're still stuck. Thankfully, Nebula is able to use her cybernetics to hack into Rocket systems, and the kill switch actually has something on it from a corporation. Something called, and again, going to the notes here, because I kind of forgot what it was called. It is called Orgo Corp. And basically, with that in mind, they think, well, if Orgo Corp created this thing, then maybe they have the means to shut it down. And to make it better, there actually is an ID number on Rocket's enhancement. So they think that they can go to Orgo Corp and find a file with that official designation on it. They can find a way to shut down the kill switch in Rocket and ultimately heal him up good as new. In the meantime, though, as they decide to go through with this, well, Rocket starts dreaming, and, well, he starts dreaming of the past. And they do kind of I'm gonna just kind of talk about this all in one go, because basically Rocket's past are told just at sporadic points throughout the movie, and quite frankly, I don't feel like going back and forth between the main plot and that, so I'm just gonna give it all in one go. And basically, Rocket dreams of his origins, and, put simply, it ain't kind. Basically, as you can tell, he was a regular raccoon whose litter was taken off of Earth, and he was taken out from his litter of raccoons, and, well, experimented on, given his robotic enhancements, and his brain was taken out of his body. His brain was altered, fine-tuned, and he got scars as a result of that, which, yeah, it wasn't pretty. And it hurt him a lot, to the point where when he was all stitched up and put in a new cage, he was in pain. However, Rocket was not alone. It turns out that the person who experimented on him had experimented on other animals as well, specifically an otter, a rabbit, and hold on one second. Sorry, I had to remember the animals. But basically, yeah, he gets thrown into a cage alongside other animals that were experimented on as well. One that's a rabbit that eventually goes by the name Floor, who has robotic spider legs growing out of it, and I think little spider eyes, but don't quote me on that. As well as a guard for its mouth. A walrus whose eyes are mechanically altered and now has wheels on its back that eventually goes by the name of Teeves, and an otter with robotic arms that eventually goes by the name Lila. And put simply, once they see Rocket, they essentially treat him like a friend, help him out, treat his wounds, and just they be nice to him. And basically from there, Rocket wound up building a relationship with these four animals, considering them like his family. And they bonded with each other, played games while in captivity, and they all just had fun together, which again, it's just kind of nice seeing them all go together. And yeah, despite the fact that the animals are mutilated in different regards, the way they act is still adorable. Floor, for example, is just this pure-hearted creature who, despite her horrific appearance, is simple. Is I want to say simple-minded, which because I don't like using that word as a descriptor, but she is. She's kind of simple-minded. She uses simple phrases and mostly uses whatever she relates to. Refers to people in the third person. But at the same time, she's a sweetheart. I like her. You can't help but not love her. She's fluffy and has multiple legs. You want to give her a hug. And on top of that, Teeves is just the big lovable oaf. He's just sweet. He's just nice, kind. Nice, kind, feels wise, but ultimately is just as nice. And Lila, she's kind-hearted and sweet and acts kind of like a mother slash sister slash potential love interest for Rocket. It's nice. I like it. And just kind of seeing the quartet of animals bonding with each other, playing games, and talking about what they want to do when they eventually get out of here, it's nice. I like that. But speaking of getting out of here, this is also where we kind of need to talk about the man who experimented on them and who is ultimately the villain of this movie. The High Evolutionary, a holier-than-thou scientist who genuinely believes that he is a god. Okay. He doesn't genuinely think he's a god, but he thinks he's the next best thing, as he wants to make a perfect race of creatures, and of course, he wants to use animals as the baseline. And what he wants to do is that he wants to super evolve animals into a humanoid state and have them live on a planet of his own creation called Counter Earth, which, yeah, for those of you who are watching this after watching my Spider-Verse retrospectives, yes, I know at one point I called it Alter Earth instead of Counter Earth. I apologize. It was a while since I saw Spider-Man Unlimited, okay? So you can forgive me for getting the name wrong. But yeah, Counter Earth was the High Evolutionary's creation, and as I just said, it was supposed to be populated with highly intelligent animals, which is why he took all these four creatures and experimented on them the way they were, because, well, because ultimately they were his experiments, and, well, he is learning from them, as at several points he does take Rocket out of his cage and he just teaches him stuff, or has him learn more, do complex equations, talk to him about Counter Earth, which, yeah, it's through the High Evolutionary that the animals do learn more things, or more specifically how Rocket learns more things, which he relays back to them. So basically Rocket and he talks to the Rocket about Counter Earth, that's where eventually his colony will go, where he's going to make them bet, where he's going to create the perfect society, how everything's gonna be better. But it still kind of has problems. The society still has issues, especially when he tries actually super evolving animals, because he has a machine that's supposed to super evolve them, but once they become evolved, they become highly aggressive and, well, not exactly what he considers ideal for a perfect society. However, Rocket thinks of a solution. He looks at the machine that the High Evolutionary is using, and I don't remember the exact technobabble he said, but put simply, he noticed something in the machine that was essentially causing their brains to go into full maximum overdrive, make them more aggressive, more angry, and basically if they can temper it down and keep it in check, then they can actually come out as they can just come out calm, not angry. And the High Evolutionary, when he hears that, he can see just a bit of irritation in his eyes. But he and his scientists do actually follow Rocket's advice And it works. They manage to super evolve the animals and they stop being aggressive. And the High Evolutionary doesn't like it. Oh no, he likes the step forward in this. He likes the step forward. Like, he likes that he now has his perfect society all ready to go. He just doesn't like the solution for it came from Rocket. Because here's the thing: while he kept Rocket and the other animals alive to study them, they were all, at the end of the day, a stepping stone. Just something that he could test out so that he can learn things about and then build off of for future experiments. He never saw any value in Rocket and his comrades beyond that, and put simply, the fact that Rocket was able to figure this out before the High Evolutionary, it ticks him off something fierce, to the point where while Rocket and his friends are just kind of sitting around talking and thinking about what they'll do once they're in the new world, he just essentially comes piling in a stuttering mess, and, well, he's angry. He's like, he wants to know how Rocket learned all this. How did he figure this out? How did he do that? Like, because he's the High Evolutionary. He should have known this first. Rocket is just a creation of his. He shouldn't know any better. But he knew better, he did. And so the High Evolutionary starts to actually see some value in Rocket. Or more specifically, his brain, as he makes it very much clear that, yes, while the new colony is ready to go on to counter Earth, Rocket and his crew aren't trying to join them. He still sees them as he still sees them as mistakes, and he doesn't want them infecting his perfect society. So what he plans to do is that he plans to surgically remove Rocket's brain so he can study it and figure out what part of the brain he wired correctly so that Rocket could learn beyond his years, and then he plans to apply that to all of his future creations. But likewise, Rocket, Teefs, Lila, and Floor, they're all gonna die. He plans to just have them incinerated the next day. So, yeah. Suddenly the incentive to escape is a lot higher. Thankfully, though, Rocket has been learning, as every time he's gone to see the High Evolutionary, he's grabbed like little bits and pieces of technology and just stored it on his person, and just stored it on his person. And when he got back to his cage, he hid it under basically all the mats and food, under all the grass and food that were littered around his cage. And so, as he's brought back by one of the High Evolutionary servants, a recorder as they call them, he ends up letting the other animals know, yeah, he plans to kill us. He never really planned to bring us to the new world. And while the other animals are horrified to learn this, well, Rocket thankfully has a means of getting around it. Going back to those little pieces that Rocket stole, it turns out that he was studying the locks and the keys that the guards were using. And from all the little bits and pieces of material that he grabbed from when he went to go see the High Evolutionary, he made his own key, which he manages to test out on the locks of the cage, and it works. It fries the lock and opens it up. And so while the animals are slightly reluctant to go with Rocket, well, they all want to go explore the world. They all want to live their own lives, see the things that they can't see. Look at a sky, the unending sky, for once in their lives. And so they take the chance, as Rocket ends up opening up the cage containing Lila and Teefs, because, yeah, the animals were stored two in a cage, so Rocket was with Floor while Lila and Teefs shared a cage. And so Lila at first is ecstatic and happy that she's all let out, that she'll be able to see the world, even hugging Rocket and saying, "It's good to have friends," and then she's shot. Straight in the back. Yeah, the High Evolutionary suspected that Rocket might be trying to do an escape attempt, and put simply, he's not having it. And, yeah. Lila dies right in front of Rocket, which fucks him, Floor, and Teefs up something fierce. As, basically, while Floor and Teefs are trying to, are just all panic mode, like, we gotta go right now, we gotta go, come on, Rocket, let's go! Rocket's just kind of frozen in place, and just screams. Like, he's just, screaming his head off and crying. Meanwhile, the High Evolutionary is calling in the guards, telling them, the animals got out, can you come back here and get them back in their cages? But, yeah, as Rocket's crying, the High Evolutionary starts mocking him as he starts screaming along with him, saying, "Oh yes, you won the screaming contest, now go back in your cage." But yeah, Rocket ain't having any of this shit, as he finally just lunges at the guy and starts ripping his face bits and pieces. Yeah, you don't see how bad the damage is at the time, but yeah, basically he just does not let up for a second, not stopping for one moment, just going crazy in a fit of fury and rage and anguish. It's Yeah, and it's clear that basically the pain is so immense that the High Evolutionary passes out from it and just clutches his face because he's just in so much pain. Unfortunately, the guards the High Evolutionary called still arrive and begin shooting at Rocket, but he's able to grab the High Evolutionary's gun and shoot back at them, not getting them aside. Unfortunately for Rocket, in the midst of the firefight, Teefs and Floor were killed as well, so now Rocket is alone. And well, he does not want to stay here. And so he ends up abandoning the bodies of his friends and just keeps running. And while the guards keep shooting at him, keep trying to get him, well, he manages to make it to a ship, and thankfully he knows how to pilot it and is able to escape from the High Evolutionary's fortress, wherein he flies off into the stars, and well, we know the rest from there. So, but the thing is, the High Evolutionary never forgot Rocket. He's still, after all these years, he is still obsessed with getting Rocket's brain, as he still wants the part of his brain that learned to adapt and grow and start studying things that were supposed to be beyond his years. Because, again, he wants that for all of his future societies so they can just not devolve. Because, put simply, the High Evolutionary is picky. If a society he creates does not fit his standard of perfection, he just scraps the whole thing. Which, yeah, but at one point in the movie he says that he's done that several times with his societies. So, yeah, he's not exactly so, yeah, guy's a bit of a nutball. And we soon learned why Adam Warlock was targeting Rocket, because you see, the Sovereign race, they were created by the High Evolutionary. And so when the High Evolutionary learned about their encounter with the Guardians of the Galaxy in Volume 2, well, he tasked them with going after Rocket, and is especially pissed that they kept this from him for so long. Unfortunately, which is why Adam is out. Which, yeah, his mother, the High Priestess, wasn't exactly happy with it, as after Adam got stabbed in the back, he retreated back to the High Evolutionary ship to be healed up by his mother, by his mother, and well, also meet the High Evolutionary, who, yeah, ever since his scrap with Rocket, has created a flesh mask to hide the scars that Rocket left on him. And, yeah, he's not happy that Adam didn't grab Rocket. As such, after showcasing that he's learned from his mistakes and actually utilized super science to enhance his own body, so that now that he has to give himself gravity powers, well, he makes it clear to the High Priestess, the Sovereign, that he wants them to deliver Rocket to him on a silver platter, or he's gonna wipe out their whole race, which he feels is his right as their creator. Yeah, these guys a douchebag still. But yeah, the High Priestess promises that they'll deliver it, especially since at this point he's torturing Adam for the fun of it, and basically the High Evolutionary decides, okay, sure, go ahead, and so he lets Adam and the High Priestess leave, and well, it's clear it's a wild goose chase. Yeah, even when the High Evolutionary is leaving, one of his recorders even says that he thinks that the Sovereign won't actually be able to successfully capture Rocket, but the High Evolutionary says, yeah, he understands that. But he considers them a plan B. He already has a plan ready to counter whatever is going on, and he thinks that he knows exactly where the Guardians are going to be heading, and he's got a way of countering them. Which, going back to the Guardians, as they're approaching Orgo Corp's home base, which is supposed to be this big fleshy lab called the Orgo. Hold on, I wrote it down too again. Sorry, where was it? Orgosphere, which is literally which again is a lab covered in weird fleshy bits. It's gross. It's gross. The Guardians are able to thankfully get through the force fields by able to get through the force field surrounding it, but they end up getting interference as their ship gets attacked by the Ravagers. And at first it seems like that the Ravagers are there to steal their stuff, but it turns out they were actually expected. You see, when the Guardians were going to Orgo Corp, Nebula said that she had a contact that was near Orgo Corp that she could call and give them reinforcements to help them. And Peter gave Nebula the okay to call whoever this contact was. And that contact was Gamora. Yep, it turns out, yeah, going back to the other universe, the alternate version of Gamora, the one who jumped back from the past to the present day during Endgame. After Endgame, she essentially went off to do her own thing and wound up joining the Ravagers. And yeah, this Gamora is not exactly the is. She's very different from the one we know, is what I'm trying to say. Whereas that Gamora had her limits and was kind of a fierce warrior. This one is very much a bitch. As she later describes herself in the movie, she barely escaped from she barely left Thanos, and she never went on to form the Guardians. And as a result, this Gamora never found the camaraderie that the Guardians of the Galaxy gave her. So as a result, and since she is now stranded in a time she knows nothing about, that's unfamiliar to her, and all she really knows is battle, of course she would end up joining the Ravagers. So yeah, it's not exactly a friendly sword. However, she is here to help the Guardians. Not out of the goodness of her heart, but she's here to help them. And basically, what she plans to do is that she plans to accompany them to get into Orgo Corp. Orgo Corp, basically arming them with suits that technicians from that Orgo Corp wear. And basically, rather than docking a ship in, because, well, if they do that, then Orgo Corp will know what they're there for. They're gonna take spacesuits and go into the surface, drilling a hole into the Orgosphere and just slipping in through there. And yeah, the Orgosphere has natural force fields that they can screw it, so that they can temporarily disable, and just kind of slip right in under the radar. So basically, things go well. But so basically, that's the plan. But well, when Peter sees Gamora, he's not exactly doing so well. Basically, something I've failed to talk about is that part of the guilt with Gamora is that, well, Peter is, he's kind of shutting people out. And I know I talked about that at the beginning of the movie with the Guardians trying to help him and him not listening, but basically, at one point, Mantis tries talking to Peter about trying to kind of move on, try and find new family, as, well, he had a grandfather on Earth before he was abducted by Yondu and the Ravagers, but well, Peter's never gone back to Earth, and despite having been there at several points, especially during Infinity War / Endgame, he's never checked back in with his grandpa. He's never really done anything to reach out to him, and well, but when the subject is even brought up at all, Peter just shoots it down. Basically, it's clear Peter is just trying to run away from things, and we kind of start to see that with Gamora here, as when Peter sees this Gamora, he tries to rekindle the romance, so to speak. Tries to reconnect with her. Tries to open up more to her, but she ain't responding. Basically, when she hears anything about how her counterpart and Peter were once a couple, well, she just does not care. She doesn't see what she saw in him. She thinks that he is she thinks he's an idiot, and ultimately she wants nothing to do with him. And many attempts on his part to try and get close to her because of that just results in her just kind of brushing him off. Just kind of tolerating him because, hey, she's getting a paycheck, so she might as well deal with this while she can. But deal with it she does, as she and the Guardians end up getting into spacesuits and going to the Orgo Corp surface, with the Ravagers essentially bailing out. Pretty much saying, they've helped you this far, Gamora will handle things from here, but after this, if you get caught, we're wiping our hands of this. So, yeah, they just kind of leave. So, yeah, the Ravagers kind of leave Gamora with the Guardians, and likewise, while most of the Guardians are going to the surface of the Orgosphere, Groot is staying behind to keep an eye on both the ship and Rocket. So, yeah, the team is sort of split. But thankfully, they do manage to reach the surface of the Orgosphere, and while we do get some kind of turbulent, and while they do end up reaching some difficulty as Peter tries to continue reconnecting with Gamora, but she's not biting, as well as having issues with communicators, which leads to a funny scene where they talk about the color, there's color buttons on the suit that they can push to talk to specific people or open a channel, and all the buttons on the suit do not match with any of the suit colors, except for maybe one, and that's Peter's, but it's just dumb. It's just dumb, but silly and fun. But thankfully, they do manage to open a hole into the Orgosphere, and after some minor difficulty, they're able to slip in. But unfortunately, getting in did alert the security, and so they did end up sending people there to investigate. Thankfully, Peter and Co are able to ditch their spacesuits and throw them into what they think is a locker. And so once security arrives, they're able to just say, "Oh, hey, what are you guys doing here? We got a bit of a disturbance here, and you guys are late on this." And well, it does thankfully work. And unfortunately, though, when the guards end up leaving, they learn something. They learn they have a problem. The locker they threw their spacesuits in, it wasn't a locker. It was a decontamination chamber. Any bit of material that contains decontamination, you just throw into the locker, and once it closes, it just ejects into space. So, yeah, the Guardians are now bereft of spacesuits. So, yeah, they kind of need a new exit strategy, which the Guardians decide they need to kind of divide and conquer to figure out. In this case, Peter, Nebula, and Gamora will try and find Rocket's file, while Drax and Mantis will go off to try and find the space dock, and basically use that to get a ship and ultimately get out of here, or maybe bring their ship in. I forget which one. Either way, the team splits up. While Drax and Mantis are thankfully able to get into the docking bay without much of a problem, especially since Mantis uses her powers to charm one of the guards towards Drax. But still, when it comes down to Peter, Gamora, Nebula, well, let's just say that when you have a version of Gamora who was pulled straight out of the arms of a war tyrant and who is only just barely a good guy, but let's just say she's a bit more trigger happy. And so while Peter tries to talk to one of the ladies in charge of one of the scientist ladies to try and get her to cooperate with them so she can lead them to the files and so forth, Gamora, well, she thinks he's an idiot and decides to just hold her at gunpoint, saying, "Either you give us what I want or I'm going to shoot you," which admittedly does work. But even Peter thinks this is going a little overboard. But thankfully, she does manage to lead them to the filing room, especially when they give her the Rocket's identifying number. And basically, through that, they're able to find the file on Rocket, which is basically this weird, I don't want to say ore, but this weird hexagonal-ish machine thing that's supposed to have all the data on Rocket, which should have the kill code for his, kill switch. Unfortunately, though, security for Orgo Corp, they're not exactly idiots. They are basically, when they saw the Guardians just walking around the whole station, they were able to identify that these were people somehow connected to whatever the breach was in the Orgosphere. And so they start to realize, okay, maybe we should call security on these people. And so sure enough, as the Guardians are all just off doing their own thing, they all end up getting surrounded, which results in, as you do, fight scenes, as Drax and Mantis are able to fend off security guards that go after them, and it's honestly a really impressive fight, and likewise, Gamora is able to get the guards from shooting at them by holding the scientists that she, Peter, and Nebula captured at gunpoint and saying, "Come near us," and I shoot her head off, which, yeah, Peter is again still saying not a good idea, but it does work for the most part, as they're able to get to an elevator and go to the lower floors, where they're hopefully able to get access to the security systems and properly get the guards and properly get access to the ship's docking bay and hopefully give the Guardians a way of getting out of there. Unfortunately, things are still kind of going bad, as while Drax and Mantis are making some progress in taking down the security guards, unfortunately, they start overpowering them as they start blasting at the pair one by one, and, that's doing a lot of damage. And likewise, while Peter, Gamora, and Nebula are able to get into the security room, unfortunately, Gamora is still very much gun-happy and keeps wanting to shoot everybody because she thinks it's the most effective way. Peter keeps trying to talk her down, but when he sees that everything is going wrong outside, he once again tries talking to the scientist lady and says, "Look, all those people out there, you know they're good people, you know they're good men. If you just give me the chance to talk to them, maybe I can talk. I think I can convince them that we're on the up and up, and then I'll leave my friends alone." Which, again, Gamora ultimately thinks that this is not going to work, but Peter does thankfully manage to talk the scientist lady into complying, as she opens up access security terminals, gets a comm link open, and does want Peter to talk with them. Only it turns out this was a ruse. Yeah, Peter was actually full of it. He knew he couldn't talk these guys down. So after she gives him access to the terminal, he just starts messing with it, and pretty much just causes all the guards to just start he just starts messing with the boosters on the guards' uniforms and causes them to just start flying all over the area. As a result, since they aren't coordinated, they can't control their weapons, and well, they can't really do much of anything. The Guardians are able to just take the data on that Orgo Corp has on Rocket and just walk out, as Peter thankfully did call Groot, and he did fly the ship right into the docking bay. So all's well that ends well, right? They got the information on Rocket and are able to thankfully fix him, right? Wrong, actually. While accessing this little thing, this again, whatever it is, does give them the information they want on Rocket, which does result in the Guardians firsthand seeing how Rocket was operated on. The data on the kill switch for the kill code, it's been deleted, removed, and it was done a little time, basically a short time before the Guardians arrived at Orgo Corp. And of course, so yeah, they still got a bit of so they still got some progress to make. But of course, the Guardians are wondering, well, what happened to it? It couldn't just disappear, right? Well, Nebula actually does provide an answer, as while searching through the data log, she's able to figure out who had accessed it, and it turns out it's one of the High Evolutionaries' recorders, and it turns out Peter ran into him while he, Nebula, and Gamora were wandering around Orgo Corp. They just bumped into each other, and Peter just kind of brushed it off. It's like, oh, sorry, man. But yeah. Turns out that was what the High Evolutionary wanted. He knew the Guardians would probably go to Orgo Corp to get information on Rocket, and so he sent his recorder He sent his recorder to Orgo Corp first, and had him get all the necessary information for deactivating the kill switch. Which I don't know why he knew the kill switch would be active. Maybe he heard what Adam said and thought, "Oh, he must be injured. They must want to get the kill switch so they can heal him." So yeah, good planning on his part, I guess, but. Yeah, they're not out of the woods yet, because now that they know that the recorder that stole the information is working for the High Evolutionary, he becomes their primary target, and so they decide to try and chase him down. Gamora, however, thinks this is a stupid plan, because the High Evolutionary isn't just a random guy. He is a big deal in some parts of the galaxy, as since he's created several races throughout it, many people consider him God. And the thing is, Orgo Corp is his baby, but even Gamora admits that Orgo Corp is basically just a cover. It experiments in all these highly advanced all these highly advanced fields of genetic manipulation. Well, ultimately, all it really does is just for funding for his other experiments, i.e., genetic mutation and alteration, i.e., Rocket and his compatriots and the highly intelligent animals. So yeah, Gamora thinks that crossing this guy is a bad idea, and she even starts advocating that if he just wants Rocket, give him Rocket and then just go on their merry way. However, the Guardians ain't having any of that shit. Rocket is their friend, and they're not just going to hand him over to some psychopath. So they plan to just go right to the High Evolutionary and get what they want. But Gamora wants none of it. In fact, she even demands that they let her off the ship, but the Guardians don't, because they don't have enough time to go meet back up with the Ravagers. Which does start making Gamora angrier and angrier, as she doesn't want any part of this. And while this does result in Peter trying to say, "What happened to you? Why are you doing this? This isn't like you. This isn't like you. You're a good person. You're part of the Guard. This is part of the reason why you broke off from Thanos, why you formed the Guardians." And this results in Gamora throwing him into a part. She throws him into a part of the machinery on their ship, and goes back to that line I mentioned, that she isn't that Gamora. She barely left Thanos, and she never formed the Guardians. Again, this Gamora is a lot rougher around the edges. This version of Gamora didn't go through all that stuff. She didn't find a family with the Guardians of the Galaxy. She was ripped out of her own time because her daddy realized that in an alternate future his great life's work was gonna be undone, and so she was brought to the future just so he could have a chance to make sure it stayed make sure that it stayed the way it was, and even went a step further. So yeah, she was thrown into unfamiliar territory, and essentially, let me put it this way. in cosmic terms, she was thrown into the deep end of the pool and told to swim. She was thrown into the deep end of the pool and told to swim. So she just made the best of it. And well, the best of it was not with the Guardians. She barely knows these people. She has no experience with any of their adventures, and yet they all know her. So of course she would want to stay away from them. The only person that she would probably trust is Nebula, and that's mostly because Nebula was the one that talked her into into turning on Thanos in the first place. So yeah, this version of Gamora is not just going to be buddy-buddy with them, and basically the more Peter tries to connect with her and tries to make her out to be like the original Gamora, the angrier she gets, to the point where, going back to the scene I was just talking about, she almost decks Peter straight in the face, but Nebula stops her, because ultimately, at the end of the day, Rocket's family. He cares about them. He's responsible for some of Nebula's own upgrades, and he's an important part of the team. And regardless of any familial ties that Nebula and Gamora have, Rocket is still important. So they're still gonna be risking life and limb to help him, which causes Gamora to just storm off in anger. Unfortunately, though, this also causes her to do a dum-dum, because, well, the Sovereign, specifically the High Priestess and Adam Warlock, are still on the tails of the Guardians so they can get Rocket. And as a result, their search leads them to Orgo Corp, and basically they manage to catch one of the Ravagers who was working with Gamora. And while they want to interrogate him to get information on Gamora's whereabouts, ultimately he isn't talking, and their attempts to use Adam Warlock to intimidate him result in his body getting incinerated. Yeah, no one liked that. But ultimately, when Gamora tries contacting him, the High Priestess pretends to be one of her crew, and, well, Gamora, apparently not recognizing the newbie on the other end of the line, ends up beaming the exact coordinates of the ship, allowing the High Priestess and Adam Warlock to follow. Though Adam Warlock does grab the Ravager's pet, so, he has a little companion. That's cute. But either way, the Guardian search does manage to bring them to the headquarters of the High Evolutionary. And he set up shop on Counter-Earth. And once the Guardians actually enter Counter-Earth's atmosphere, they find that, well, Counter-Earth's a good name, because the society on Counter-Earth is a lot like Earth. Okay, the populace of Counter-Earth are all highly intelligent and super evolved anthropomorphized animals, but they look, act, and sound like regular people. Okay, they don't speak in a language that I understand, but they have lives, they have homes, they have cars, they mow their lawns. We see one animal lady walking her baby around in a carriage. We see some people wearing suits as they're clearly on their way to work. And when the Guardians land, they're all gawking at the big spaceship that comes down. And, well, when the Guardians end up stepping outside of the ship, well, things kind of go haywire from there. As Peter wants to say, "We come in peace," well, one of the girls, one of the anthropomorphized children of this world, ends up lightly throwing a ball at them, and Drax, who doesn't know what the word subtle means, takes said ball and throws it right in the little girl's face, knocking her down, resulting in the populace of Counter-Earth thinking that these people are hostile and start throwing rocks at them. Thankfully, they're able to get these people off their back by having Groot go full kaiju, as they call it, but not a very good first impression. Thankfully, Peter is able to ingratiate the team with the populace, as in the panic, a bat lady wound up falling over and injuring her leg, and Peter does act more calm and rational to her, even giving her a cloth to help with her wound, and so she starts to realize that they're friends and invites them into her home. I mean, personally, that seems a bit like a jump. I mean, if I got jumped by a bunch of alien weirdos and suddenly they gave me a cloth, I would probably think, okay, they're not hostile, but I probably wouldn't want them involved in my business. But either way, she invites them into her home where her husband and children live, and, well, they start asking her questions. And while they can't communicate verbally, they are able to impart their message. The Guardians are able to impart their message onto her and let her know what they're looking for. They're looking for the recorder who stole the data on the kill code for Rocket's kill switch, and basically she's able to tell them where he is, as afar off the Guardians see what looks like a mechanical red pyramid jutting out of the surface of Counter-Earth, and the lady says that the person they're looking for, he's probably there. As such, the Guardians thank her for her help, and after commandeering her car, Well, Peter, Gamora, and Groot the end up going to the Fortress of the High Evolutionary. Though Peter gives his blasters to Groot for something that comes up later. In the meantime, Drax and Mantis are left behind to keep an eye on the ship, or more specifically, Drax is left behind to keep an eye on the ship, and Mantis is left behind to keep an eye on Drax. And Gamora, she wants no part of this, so she's just staying on the ship so she doesn't get any involved in this. And so after Peter has some difficulty learning how to drive because he was 8 when he was taken off of Earth, they do manage to drive through a nearby city to reach the High Evolutionary's fortress. But yeah, it turns out that the Counter-Earth society is a little too much like Earth, because even here, children are still being sold meth and a random guy is being assaulted in an alley and without anyone helping. I mean, these guys are the superheroes. They probably should stop it. But hey, I'm not here to judge. They're on a time limit, so whatever. Either way, they reach the High Evolutionary's gate, and we see that while this planet is populated by a bunch of super intelligent anthropomorphized animals, well, the High Evolutionary has his own mixture of protectors. In this case, based on what I can tell, he basically took some of his highly evolved animals and did to them what he did to Rocket and his friends, transforming them into these highly advanced mechanized monsters that he calls the Hellspawn. And they're essentially the guards of Counter-Earth and the fortress. As such, when Peter, Nebula, and Groot arrive, they pretty much say that Nebula isn't allowed. They pretty much just tell the Hellspawn pretty much say that the High Evolutionary has been expecting them, though they want Nebula to stay outside because her arm's basically a weapon. No weapons allowed. And when they scan Peter, they find that he has no weapons on them. Don't know why they don't scan Groot, but hey, whatever. Either way, they end up leading Peter and Groot into the High Evolutionary's base, and well, it's a trap. Yeah, even they are aware that this is a trap. That odds are, if the recorder who took the kill code went straight back to the High Evolutionary, odds are the guy was expecting them. So, yeah, Peter says that they'll be fine because, hey, if you know it's a trap, it's not a trap, it's a face-off. But yeah, once they face the High Evolutionary, at first he's just kind of ignoring them as he's going about his work. But the instant Peter sees the recorder that took the information on Rocket, that's when the High Evolutionary starts talking to them and pretty much just starts rambling off into his own villain speech, which actually leads to kind of a missing moment where Peter does not really give a shit. As he talks about, and basically he just talks about how he wants to create the perfect society, while that he created Counter-Earth to be a mirror of Earth, because he visited Earth years ago, and he was fascinated by the wonder and culture and amazement, but felt that that Earth had too much hatred, bigotry, and other social issues, and thought that he could just make it better. Hence why he created Counter-Earth. Basically, he wants to make Earth he wants to make the best version of Earth. Though, of course, even Peter thinks that this is stupid because when he was driving through the city, he still saw some things pretty much wrong with this world, so that doesn't sound like a perfect society. To which the High Evolutionary agrees and admits to them that he plans to raise this experiment, that he plans to raise this civilization too. So, that sucks. But the thing is, yeah, that was part of the plan. Which is why he's raising the planet right now, because, well, he knew the Guardians would come, and odds are they would have a rocket on their ship. So while Peter and Groot are talking to the High Evolutionary, he ends up calling back down to the guards of his fortress, specifically a Hellspawn by the name of Warpig, and has her fly back to the Guardian ship with the intent of capturing Rocket. Ultimately, Thankfully, Gamora is still on standby, and while she took some time on the ship to start snooping through more of the stuff, including through Peter's backpack, resulting in her finding a picture of Peter with his mom and his grandpa. Well, when Warpig arrives on the ship, well, Gamora decides to step in because, well, while she still doesn't get why they're going through all this stuff for Rocket, she does to conclude that Rocket must be very loyal if they're willing to go through all this shit just to save his life. So, yeah, when Warpig comes to take Rocket, she decides to actually defend Rocket and starts fighting off Warpig. Unfortunately, though, despite Gamora's own unique abilities, or more specifically her fighting prowess, Warpig is too powerful and just knocks Gamora aside like a rag doll. Thankfully, though, or unthankfully, depending on your point of view, This is when the Sovereign arrive, specifically Adam Warlock, as he comes flying in and manages to knock Warpig aside, saving Rocket and subsequently Gamora. And while Warpig wonders why Adam is attacking them, since they're supposed to be on the same side, well, like I said, Adam and his people need the credits so that the High Evolutionary doesn't destroy the Sovereign race. And as a result, when Warpig tries to land another attack on him, all this results in is Adam grabbing her by the neck, snapping her head clean off her shoulders. So, a superhero film. However, while Adam and Warpig were talking, Gamora took the opportunity to grab Rocket and ditch the ship. And so Adam tries pursuing them, but it's at this point that the High Evolutionary decides to enact his raise the planet plan, as he starts getting his ship and has it start leaving Counter Earth, which I'm guessing that his ship was very much tied to the core of this planet, because as it starts flying away, the planet starts blowing up. And yes, you do see innocent people get blown up along with it, including, I suspect, the Bat family that helped the Guardians. So, a bunch of innocent people are dying now. Thank you, movie. Which, okay, yeah, the bad guy's doing this, so, well, whatever. Either way, Gamora manages to kind of to turn back around towards the ship, because at this point she knows she's got to get the hell out of here. But in the meantime, Adam Warlock, seeing all the destruction, quickly realizes his mom might be in danger. So he ends up flying back to the ship, trying to plan to save her. But sadly, he's too little, too late. As when he tries getting close, their ship blows up with her on it. So yeah, High Priestess of the Sovereign is dead, and Adam saw it happen. So he's probably going to be a little pissy. However, after Gamora has a bit of a tumble as she gets Rocket back on the ship, she tries to get access to the controls, though she does end up picking up a passenger, Adam Warlock, who flies back to the ship to try and get some revenge. But in the explosion that hurt his mother, he wound up getting heavily injured. Thankfully, Gamora, who is starting to grow more of a conscience, does take him in and bring him to the medical bay, though she keeps him locked up. And plus she also grabs his little animal, so that's nice. Good on her. But yeah, basically, with Rocket and Adam Warlock back in their positions, she manages to take control of the ship and starts trying to fly off of this and tries to just get off the surface and avoid all the explosions and rounds of death. However, Back with Peter, Groot, and the High Evolutionary. Basically, the High Evolutionary thinks that, well, they got what they wanted. The planet's being raised, so just kill Peter and Groot now and just leave it at that. So he plans to just leave, and while the recorder who took the information on Rocket starts gloating at Peter and Groot that they walked right into a trap, they were just idiots. Well, Peter once again states it isn't a trap, it's a face-off. At which point he reveals the ace up his sleeves. It turns out they should have scanned Groot, because inside his roots were several guns, which he pulls out all at once and just starts shooting everybody in the room. As well, on top of that, Groot also had a grenade, and when he throws it to one section of the room, he manages to cause an explosion that not only kills a few of the guards, but also manages to bring down part of the ceiling, which cuts off the High Evolutionary his second in command recorder from the rest of the room. The end result, Groot ends up giving Peter his lasers back, and they pretty much just start shooting everyone down that tries getting close. It's actually a really awesome fight scene. It's actually a really awesome fight scene. It shows how well coordinated they are. But either way, everyone ends up getting killed, save for the recorder who has the data on Rocket. And so while he's happy that they spared his life, well, Peter's just telling him no, they just don't want you going too soon. As such, he ends up shooting out a bit of glass from the room, and he jumps out with the recorder in hand. And the thing is, again, keep in mind they're on the High Evolutionary ship as it's taking off, so they're jumping off a ship that's about to enter orbit, so that's a long drop. Thankfully, Groot is able to save them as he jumps out the window himself and grows wings, able to catch Peter and the scientist. But, well, Peter doesn't. But yeah, they don't need the recorder alive. They just need access to his memory banks. And so once they fly towards the surface, well, Peter intentionally has him hit the ground first and intentionally drags him right through the ground and just, well, it's simply It's a lot. He's in a lot of pain. And it's clear that Peter wanted to make it hurt, which again makes sense considering that Rocket's life is on the line. But either way, they do manage to kill the guy and pry his little head device off of him. And thankfully, it's at this point when Gamora managed to catch up to them. And after she manages to get a hold of the ship, Peter tells her to open up the hangar so that he and Groot can jump back in. But the thing is, the group is about 3 members short. So what happened to Nebula, Mantis, and Drax? Well, Drax being Drax, he wanted to go right to the High Evolutionary's fortress to help Peter because he thought something would be wrong. As such, he wound up knocking this random guy off of his motorcycle, and so he decided to take it to the High Evolutionary's base, with Mantis coming behind because she tried to stop him, and Drax tricked her into getting onto the motorcycle. As such, while Nebula started seeing everything blowing up around her, she wanted to try and call Drax and Mantis to bring the ship in, but since they were already at the fortress, well, that plan was a bust. As such, their plan was to break into the High Evolutionary's fortress and save Peter and Co. And they managed to climb onto the ship and start trying to break a door open. But they aren't aware about Peter and Groot's escape plan. So while they eventually do manage to get into the fortress just as it breaks away from Counter Earth's atmosphere, well, their plan is kind of for naught. And ultimately, they start to think that Peter and Co. might be dead. Thankfully, that's not the case. As back with Peter and Co., they're able to use the recorder's head transplant, and they manage to hook it back into Rocket as the kill switch kill code is still located inside. Which, yeah, that's clear that as they try implying it, it's clear Rocket is very much close to death's door. As once his dream about him escaping from the High Evolutionary concludes, he has a near-death experience, as he stands in what looks like a white void with some cages dotted around it, and from the light in the void, he sees a familiar face. Lila, who, when he sees Lila, he just kind of breaks down crying. He just hugs her, she's happy to see him, and she talks about how they were right. The sky is vast and endless, and she's been exploring it. And not alone either. As she gestures towards the light, and we see Teeves and Floor right there. And Rocket is just in tears, and he's just apologizing up and down for leaving them, but they say it's okay, it's fine. But he asks if he can join them, and they say he can, but as he tries walking towards the light with Teeves and Floor, Lila stops him and says, not yet. He still has a purpose on Earth. And Rocket, well, he's still just bubbling. It's just like, what purpose? We were created for nothing. We were just created to destroy. We're meaningless. Which Lila responds with actually a really good line. Let me see if I can find it, because I know I did write it down. Hold on. There are the hands that made us, and then there are the hands that guide the hands. Basically, what she's talking about is that it's not the High Evolutionary that defines us. It's basically her saying there's a higher power than the High Evolutionary, and he's looking out for them. Or so, yeah. It's kind of a Christian motive there, but basically, she is also telling Rocket that the purpose he made is his own. He's not defined by what the High Evolutionary said he was supposed to be. Rocket defines what he is. He's not bound down. He creates his own fate, and he has to live for them. And as a result, she just hugs Rocket and calls him her little raccoon. And Rocket at first tries to defend himself, say I'm not a raccoon. But then that's when he gets woken up. As thankfully, that's when the kill switch's kill code gets brought in. And Peter, as Rocket was flatlining, Peter started having a freak out. And while Gamora tried to tell Peter, no, he's gone, you gotta let him go, Peter just would not let go for a second, as he just starts yelling, no, I'm not doing this, I'm not letting him go, and just starts pounding on Rocket's chest, trying to get his heart beating, which, yeah, does result in Gamora kind of seeing more a side of Peter that she hadn't seen before, one that really is, very much caring and afraid and vulnerable, so to speak. But thankfully, that did do the trick, and the kill switch kill code is uploaded to, the kill switch. As such, with it gone, they're able to finally apply a med pack to Rocket, and, he's healed up, good as new, and and wakes up, which results in Peter and Groot just pulling Rocket in for a hug. Which, yeah, it's sweet, it's nice, and I like it. But in the meantime, back with Nebula, Drax, and Mantis, they manage to, as they're kind of finding their bearings on the High Evolutionary ship, they find that the area of the ship they're located in is filled with more of his experiments, specifically children. Yeah, the has been experimenting with children, and while he has augmented their own brain so that they can rewire certain systems in like under a minute, and altered their physiology so that they can withstand so they can do more things that other organic beings can't do, like run for prolonged periods of time and increase their. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. But yeah, he increased their metabolism so they can do tasks for longer periods of time. They're still kids, and they're locked in cages. So naturally, the trio of Guardians decide to start letting them out of said cages, with, ironically, Drax being the most friendly with them. However, it's at this moment that Nebula starts trying to make contact with Peter so they can learn where he is on the ship, and so when Peter does pick up, he lets them know he's not on the ship. He and Groot manage to escape, and they manage to save Rocket, which the instant that Mantis, Drax, and Nebula hear that Rocket's okay, they all just kind of have their own little breakdowns. And my favorite is Nebula's, who she just freezes in place for a second and looks like that she's trying to hold back a cry. It's actually really sweet and some really good acting on Karen Yillin's part, so good on her. But unfortunately, though, the Nebula, Mantis, and Drax are still in the metaphorical lion's den, and so while Nebula is talking with Peter, the High Evolutionary and his second-in-command Recorder walk into the room and just order the kids to get back into their cages, and so he ends up knocking the Guardians aside with his powers and takes the communicator and pretty much just tells Peter, "You still have something I want, and I have your friends. So you're gonna meet me at this specific location, and you're gonna hand my creation over to me, or I'm gonna wipe the floor with your friends." And Peter, while Peter has no intention of collaborating with this guy, well, he still needs to rescue his friends. And so after he insults the High Evolutionary to hell and back, resulting in the High Evolutionary destroying the communicator so he doesn't hear it, well, Peter decides that he needs a plan. And while Gamora still is vouching for potentially giving Rocket to the High Evolutionary, which nobody wants, which did lead to a funny encounter where Peter first said they'll die trying to save them, and Rocket's like, "Hey, I don't want to die trying." And I thought they didn't think that was our motto. I don't want to die. I don't want to die trying. And then Gamora suggests, which results in Gamora suggesting they hand him over. It's like, "We died trying. That's our motto." Again, I love that having a near-death experience has not changed Rocket in that regard. That's fun. But ultimately, Peter is not just going to go in guns blazing either. He does have a plan, and guess what? That does involve some help. Which again, I'm sorry, I have to keep going back to the notes. I keep forgetting the guy's name. Basically, he ends up calling Kraglin back on Nowhere, and he says that he wants Kraglin's help. They need something from him. And so while Peter does go to meet with the High Evolutionary at the designated spot, he doesn't come alone. As sure enough, as Peter arrives at the designated meeting spot, another, well, I guess I can say ship arrives. Or more specifically, the entirety of Nowhere, which I have to remind you, Nowhere is supposed to be the head of a dead Celestial, or a Titan, whatever. Bottom line, it's a giant-ass head, and to remind you, it used to be the cesspool of the galaxy, so it's armed and dangerous. So the instant that Nowhere appears, they immediately pull out their cannon and start opening fire on the High Evolutionary ship, which gives Peter, Rocket, and Groot, and Gamora the cover they need to break off from their own ships and just start flying straight for the High Evolutionary ship, with the intent of breaking in and saving their friends. But speaking of said friends, After the High Evolutionary hung up on Peter, he wound up dropping the trio into this pit with the intention of having them get eaten by some monsters called obelisks. Ultimately, it's at this point where the kids that the group saved before end up watching them, and knowing that Peter is going to be mounting a rescue, Drax is able to talk to the kids and tell them to get away from the cockpit because they know if they are near there, they're probably going to get jettisoned into space. So, they did everything, so they need to get away from there. Which also that scene does lead to something kind of heartwarming as Drax acts like does act like kind of like a father to the kids. It's sweet, I like it. But point is, yeah, the kids are thankfully away from the storage, or thankfully away from the cockpit when all hell breaks loose, so they're fine. They're all good. And the High Evolutionary ship is just taking damage. In the meantime, the High Evolutionary himself, he's losing his shit. He's just he desperately wants to get Rocket, and he's tired of all the interference. And so to try and take care of Nowhere, he orders that all of his other Hellspawn be released. And while his second in command objects to this, well, he's just pushing for it. So they end up releasing them, resulting in them swarming the Guardians' ships and also the whole of Nowhere. On top of that, well, the Guardians end up having. Unfortunately, though, Peter and Gamora continue to have issues as on their ship, Adam Warlock wakes up, breaks through his restraints, and tries to once again attack the pair, but all this results in is him once again getting thrown out of space and right into the High Evolutionary ship. I know it's kind of weird how I keep bringing him up every now and then, but I kind of need to because it kind of feeds into what happens later, so... But either way, yeah. Despite having to fight through all the hordes of Hellspawn, the Guardians are able to get onto the High Evolutionary ship, and they immediately want to try and find where their friends are. Thankfully, though, their friends are okay, as when everything went to hell and back, the High Evolutionary ordered that the friends be fed to these monsters called the obelisks, or I think that's what they're called. Again, I'm going to go back to my notes on this. I think they're called the obelisks, but don't quote me on that. Where is it? Yeah, they're called obelisks. But thankfully, though, Mantis is able to communicate with them using her empathic powers, and, well, turns out that while they acted very hostile towards the trio, they were mostly just out of fear of what the trio would do to them versus them actually being hungry. So thankfully, Mantis is able to get them on their side, and she's able to charge Drax and Nebula are able to charge right into the hangar bay as Peter and co are there to save them. As such, with the friends all saved, they immediately think, well, screw this place, let's get the hell out of here. But that's when Drax, Mantis, and Nebula tell that there are kids on board, which they have to save. So, yeah, the Guardians decide they have to do this, and while Gamora's still arguing for getting out of there, well, majority vote wins on this one, so she ends up joining them. And here's the thing, at this point, the High Evolutionary is kind of losing his shit more and more. And the instant he learned the Guardians landed on his ship, he wanted to order his guards to go down there, especially since one of the intruders might be Rocket. However, his second in command finally called him out on all his shit, saying that he's just obsessed with getting this experiment and he needs to drop it, but the High Evolutionary ain't having any of that shit, which results in his second in command finally starting to say, you know what, you're an idiot, I'm gonna host a coup. This results in the High Evolutionary losing his shit even more as he unleashes a burst of his gravitation powers across the entire hull, killing everyone inside and smashing the ship's controls. As such, with them all dead, the High Evolutionary orders his guards to kill all the intruders and bring him Rocket. Which, yeah, as the Guardians go further into the ship, they enter a hallway and they find a bunch of various Hellspawn and guards that the High Evolutionary sicked on them. And this results in probably one of the most kick-ass fight scenes in the whole movie, as we see the Guardians just essentially methodically moving around each other and taking out the guards with almost little effort, and it's just so awesome. It's just cool to see them all so coordinated, working off each other, flowing into one another, providing backup at several positions, blasting out the guards in one spot, just the camera panning over, them all just working one by one, setting things up so they can pay off later or take out more guards, just pinning one guard to the wall and then focusing on another, just knocking them all aside, killing off Hellspawn. It's just so fucking cool, and I love it. But either way, once they take care of all the guards, the groups once again split up, with Nebula and Rocket going to the controls to get the ship under control, while Peter and co. go off to try and free the kids. Unfortunately, when Nebula and Rocket find the what's left of the control room, well, they realize they realize that the controlling the ship might be a bust. Thankfully, because of Nebula's nanomachine arm, she volunteers for actually piloting the ship, while she sends Rocket off to go and help Peter and Co. with the kids. Meanwhile, back on Nowhere, well, I know I failed to mention this, and I keep forgetting to talk about this. Pretty much everything is going to hell with all the Hellspawn there, but Kraglin, thankfully, is able to get control of, well, Yondu's arrow, fin, whatever thing, and does it with the power of heart. I'll talk about that when I get to my thoughts on things. And with the help of Cosmo, they're able to kill off all the Hellspawn. There, I mentioned it. Moving on. However, as the Guardians are able to thankfully and basically with Nebula's help, the Guardians are able to bring the High Evolutionary ship closer to Nowhere, and they end up opening up Nowhere's dock. And what they want to do is that they need to get both Nowhere and the High Evolutionary ship close enough together that it creates an air pocket that they can just throw the kids across through, so they don't get jettisoned into the vacuum of space. And as such, they are able to do that, especially with the help of Cosmo and her psychic powers. Though it is clearly a strain on her, but they are able to start getting the kids off one by one. However, as Nebula is able to get the High Evolutionary ship in proper position, she ends up abandoning her spot in the control room and tries to leave. But as she rejoins the Guardians who are moving all the kids, she asks a very obvious question: "Where's Rocket?" And it turns out, yeah, back with Rocket, while he is helping usher the kids off the ship, he ends up noticing something in the cage quarters. And when he goes to investigate, well, he finds a bunch of caged animals. None of them are like experimented on like him, but they are all helpless and afraid. And sure enough, Rocket ends up finding the cage containing all the raccoons, and, well, he's able to use the key he had made all those years ago and is able to free them. Which ultimately finally convinces Rocket that he has a raccoon, because these little things all look like him. And so Rocket ends up feeling sorry for all of the creatures and decides that he needs to save them all. Unfortunately, though, the High Evolutionary knew that Rocket would come down here and just starts going nuts on him, using his gravity powers to just start throwing him into walls and ceilings, and just freaking out about him and yelling about how Rocket thought he could be something, be anything else. He's just a monster. He just is his creation. He's free to do to him whatever he wants, and blah blah blah, yada yada yada. And at one point, and as he starts yelling, he once again refers to Rocket as his number designation. But Rocket, well, he has an ace up his sleeve. I forgot to mention this earlier, but Rocket was experimenting with gravity boots earlier in the movie, and he's still wearing them. So as he got thrown into the ceiling, he activated those boots, and they allowed him to fly allow him to go right to the floor. And as the High Evolutionary is confused, Rocket responds to him, calling him by his number designation by saying, "The name's Rocket Raccoon." And he just blasts the guy with one of his laser rifles. And at this point, the rest of the Guardians show up, and it just leads to a cathartic beatdown as they all just one by one take turns smacking the ever-loving shit out of this guy. It's so fucking satisfying. It's not the best fight scene, but it's just so cathartic to see this whiny little pansy finally get the shit beat out of him. It's nice. But ultimately, as he gets beaten down enough, well, the fight ends with Gamora stabbing him again, and, well, in the midst of it, she actually does peel off his flesh mask, and we see the extent of damage that Rocket was able to do to the guy's face. As, yeah, he's very much bloodied, and a lot of the skin has just been, it's gone. It's like it's all gone. It's just muscle tissue and sinew, and one of his eyes is just bugged out. Yeah, the dude ain't doing well. But Rocket decides to not kill him. He doesn't save him from the ship, but he decides that he isn't worth the effort of killing, and, well, Rocket's a guardian of the galaxy. He just doesn't think it's worth it. As such, he convinces the rest of the Guardians to go and help him save the rest of the animals, and they are able to get all the animals off the ship. But unfortunately, Cosmo can't hold the High Evolutionary ship in place for much longer, and she ends up losing her grip on it. And thankfully, most of the people on the ship are off, including some of the guards who realized, okay, if we stay here, we're gonna die. But in the midst of all this, as everyone's escaping, Peter wound up dropping his Zune, which he's had throughout the movie and was providing music. And when he went back to grab it, well, the floor he was on wound up collapsing, and so, well, he wound up on one of the lower floors as it was on fire. Thankfully, Peter was able to grab like able to grab like a little tube of or hose or whatever and jump out of the ship, and he managed to push to use enough of a boost from the said hose to try and jettison him towards nowhere. But unfortunately, the ship was too far back, and as a result, Peter ends up getting stuck floating in space. And yeah, the cold of space starts to take him as his cheeks start to expand, his eyes start getting swollen shut, and he starts freezing up. It's kind of horrifying to see, put simply. Now, personally, I'm wondering why Peter didn't have his helmet, which, yeah, pet peeve, he does not wear a Star-Lord helmet at any point in the movie. It's weird. However, but either way, Peter does get some unexpected help. Going back to Adam Warlock, after he went nuts on Gamora and Peter when he woke back up, well, when he was on the High Evolutionary ship, he still tried to attack the group, but because of his injuries earlier in the movie, he couldn't do anything, and so as a result, Drax wound up saving him and bringing him back to nowhere. And when Adam woke up, he wondered, "Why did you save me?" To which Groot and Drax responded, "Because everyone deserves a second chance." And so Adam wound up taking that to heart, and as Peter is flying is dying in space, Adam flies out to him, and after a kind of sort of Jesus metaphor, he manages to grab Peter and brings him back to nowhere, where thankfully in Nowhere's atmosphere and gravity, Peter is able to heal up. Now I'm just going to forget that he was in space and he should have died anyway. But let's have a happy ending here, as everybody just crowds around Peter and they all engage in a group hug, with Adam Warlock awkwardly joining, while Gamora just kind of watches from the sidelines. So there you go. But from there, yeah, that's it. The High Evolutionary is done for. Everybody's been saved, and, well, Nowhere needs reconstructing. For Gamora, she feels that her job is done and decides to kind of hit the road and go join back up with the Ravagers, but all this experience has kind of made her. Has essentially kind of softened her a little bit. And while she's still not the Gamora that Peter knows, as she's leaving, well, when she runs into Peter, and Peter says the person she is now is still pretty awesome. But though before they leave, Gamora does say to him, I bet we were fun." So it's clear that I do like that she did. So yeah, it's clear that she finally did see what her counterparts saw in Peter, and likewise, Peter finally accepts that this is not his Gamora, but he's okay. He's ready to move on. And speaking of which, speaking of moving on, he thinks it's time he looked back to his past as well. And so he ends up calling a meeting of the Guardians and says he plans to go back to Earth. After all, he has family on Earth, specifically his grandfather, and he wants to see him. He wants to reconnect with him in some regard, and he just wants to find himself, so to speak. He wants to actually do something, and the Guardians are a little shocked at this, but also understanding, though at the same time, Mantis says that she wants to leave too, as she spent her whole life doing what other people wanted, but she now wants to see what she wants in her life. While Drax offers to go with her, Mantis says that she doesn't want him to because, well, because the whole point is to see what she can do by herself. So, yeah. On top of that, Nebula says that she might need Drax's help. With all the children living on Nowhere, they have a new society they need to build up, and Nebula, well, she saw a side of Drax that she had never seen before when he interacted with the kids. And she even says, "You're not a destroyer, you're a father." And she wants his help in helping raise them and helping rebuild Nowhere. So, and as a result, yeah, it looks like most of the Guardians are disbanding, and even Rocket's lamenting like, "That's it? So the Guardians are no more?" But Peter does tell Rocket, "No, the galaxy is always going to need its Guardians, and the Guardians need a good leader." And, well, he thinks Rocket fits the bill, as he gives him his Zune and officially makes him the leader, which Rocket's a little bit dumbstruck by this, but he accepts happily. And from there, the group engages in one last group hug. Groot says he loves everybody, which, yeah, it's one of the times that he doesn't say I am Groot. He says I love you guys. It's nice. And from there, the film ends as Rocket ends up turning on the music with the Zune, and everybody in Nowhere just gets into a very happy dance, just happily cheers their victory. Gamora ends up joining back up with the Ravagers, who are happy to see her again as they all greet her in a hug and showcase, yeah, this might not be the crowd that we're used to seeing her with, but they're family to her, so that's nice. And likewise, we see Peter go back to Earth as he goes to meet up with his grandfather, who the instant his grandfather sees Peter, he knows who he is immediately and just pulls him in for a hug. It's just sweet and I like it. And so the film ends as Drax decides to finally dance, because early in the movie he said it's for idiots, and Rocket's just happily howling. So there you go. But of course, since this is Marvel, we got our after credit scenes, and both of them really don't add to anything, but they do act as nice little epilogues. The first of these epilogues is focusing on Rocket and his new Guardians of the Galaxy, which in this case consists of him, Groot, Kraglin, one of the kids whose name is Philo, I think. Let me check it out. I know I wrote it down. Yeah, her name is Philo, and Adam Warlock. Basically, they are a new team of Guardians, and they're about to protect a village. And they're basically on a desert planet protecting a village from a group of monsters. And to pass the time, they're talking about their favorite musicians and so forth, but ultimately Rocket ends things with "Come and Get Your Love," which I think is nice and poetic, as that's the song that these films technically got started on. And so as the Guardians listen to the music, they all charge in, ready to kick ass and save lives. So that's nice. But as for the second epilogue, well, it's with Peter as he's sitting on Earth and eating cereal with his grandfather, who's reading a newspaper, and a nice little callback again to the holiday special. It showcases this. The headline of the newspaper says Kevin Bacon, doing a tell-all on being abducted by aliens, which is what happened in the holiday special. Mantis and Drax wound up kidnapping Kevin Bacon for Peter as a Christmas gift. So that's fun. So. Long-ass plot summary out of the way, what are my thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? I think, out of all the Guardians movies, this one is the best. And that's saying something considering the quality of the first two Guardians movies. All three films have a way of essentially building on each other, which is what a good film series should do. But the thing is, while Guardians of the Galaxy is still interspersed with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they're still interconnected in their own way. Because the Guardians exist the way they do, they kind of exist in their own world. Still a part of the MCU, but not as constrained by them. Yeah, they'll make references to them, of course, especially in relation to stuff like with the Infinity Saga, and some little references that showcase that the galaxy has learned some tricks ever since the thing with Thanos. Especially since in one scene, one of the Ravagers uses sling ring magic to open gateways and create constructs. But the films themselves kind of operate on their own little structure. And put simply, Guardians Volume 3 very much takes what was built beforehand and expands it, creates something bigger. It takes the arcs and journeys that these characters have gone on and brings them to a natural conclusion. Tests the bonds of friendship that these people have built for one another, and showcases how, in regardless situation, no matter how much they clash, why they're ultimately more than just a team. They're a family. And to kind of go off of that, let's go down the list. Firstly, let's talk about Peter and his character development in the movie. The major thing with Peter is that he was essentially stuck in an emotional rut. He was essentially refusing to let go of things and move on. And as a result, it resulted in him just kind of being stuck in place. And we saw that in two ways. One, when Mantis tried talking to Peter about potentially going to see his grandpa, well, he didn't even want to consider it. He just ignored it, moved on, and essentially just didn't want nothing to do with it. And it's not because his grandfather was malicious or anything. It's because he just did not want to go back to Earth. After all, Earth was the planet his mother died on. And put simply, he just wants nothing to do with it. He wants to push all those memories out. He just wants to focus on what he has now, what his new family. And especially with Mantis, which, yeah, one of the things that the holiday special revealed was that Mantis was actually his biological sister on his dad's side. So, okay. But basically, basically Peter is refusing to look back on Earth to try and reconnect because he does not want to confront anything involving his mother, and even tries painting his grandfather in a negative light, as his grandpa ushered him out of the room when his mother died because, well, as he thought he didn't want him to be around. No, basically even Manus says maybe he just didn't want you to see your mother like that. But yeah, Peter is just running away from that. And likewise, a similar case is that he's trying to run away from his feelings of, he's essentially in denial about Gamora, as with this other Gamora running around, well, he looks at her and he sees the Gamora he lost in Infinity War. And basically every time he sees her or sees this Gamora, he tries to reconnect, rekindle, tries to capture whatever they had before. But the thing is, as the film showcases, this isn't his Gamora. One of the things that I love when it comes to alternate universes and parallel versions of yourself is that, well, when it comes down to alternate realities, other versions of you may not be like you. They are their own people, and depending on how their lives turned out, it will depend on the people they turn into. And we see that demonstrated with this Gamora. The original Gamora, the one that we had seen in the first two Guardians films and who was killed in Infinity War, was someone who, like this Gamora, wanted to break off from Thanos because she knew what he was doing was wrong, but ultimately didn't find that opportunity until she met the Guardians. People who were like her were outcasts, misfits, who did not know what the right or wrong thing was, but ultimately were able to band together and rose up, and they all helped each other to be better and help and become heroes. And likewise, because of all that, Gamora was able to grow closer to Peter when she saw through his idiocy and fake and faux bravado, and saw the heart of a genuinely kind man who wanted to do the right thing. Yes, he was a smuggler, he was a crook, and he was a crook, but at the end of the day, she saw the heart. She saw the heart in there. That through all the antics and the dance-offs and the weirdness and stupidity, there was the heart of a man who genuinely cared, and that ultimately is what drew Gamora closer to him and made her want to be in a relationship with him. But ultimately, the Gamora that we meet here is not that Gamora. This Gamora was pulled from her timeline before she got the chance to even meet the other people who would become the Guardians of the Galaxy. She was pushed into a future she didn't understand. And while she did eventually leave Thanos, like she said, she barely left him. She only left him because Nebula pressured him, and she left him right in the middle of a war zone, for crying out loud. Of course, she wouldn't just immediately go right to the Guardians. She doesn't know these people. Of course she would go to the Ravagers. She's the daughter of the Mad Titan Thanos. Why wouldn't she decide to go with people that are like her? People who aren't already superheroes, who are basically the scum of the galaxy, because she fits right in. And as a result, this Gamora is a lot rougher around the edges and sees the Guardians of the Galaxy as just goody two-shoes, people who are trying to do good and are ultimately just idiots because of their sentimentality and connection with one another. She thinks they're all just, and ultimately the only real connection she has with them is with her sister, and even then she only interacts with them at all because Nebula offered to pay her. That's it. Throughout the whole movie, she's constantly advocating for just giving the bad guy what he wants so he won't bug them anymore. But the only reason that doesn't work is because the Guardians say, fuck that, we're not giving him Rocket, we care about this little guy. So no, we're going to keep fighting to protect him. And as a result, she just kind of gets pulled into everything that they go through. But ultimately, but going back to how this relates to Peter, part of his arc in the movie is that he has to finally accept that ultimately, while this may be Gamora, it's not his Gamora. And as much as he keeps trying to project and hope that this Gamora could replace the one he lost, at the end of the day, it's not her. And the more he forced it, the worse it got. Until by the end of the movie, he finally had to accept his Gamora was gone. And yes, he grew closer to this one too. Not in the same way, but still. But at the end of the day, he still had all the time he had with Gamora. It still mattered. it still had an impact, and it hits harder with the final line that this other Gamora says. And when she says, "I bet we were fun," and I bet we were fun. Again, I wrote down the line. Again, I refer to my notes a lot more on this one. When she says, "I bet we were fun, like you wouldn't believe." Again, it showcases that Peter is still longing for those times, but ultimately he has to let go and move on. And it's nice, and it's great character development as we see Peter willing to step forward and accept and, well, finally let go, move on, actually try to move past his traumas and try and reconnect with something he can get back, with family that he knows he still has. It's really nice, and it's especially fueled by the fact that part of his character trauma is that everybody close to him just seems to die or disappear, and it's part of the reason why he fights so hard to get Rocket back, and it's why he's pushing so hard to replace the past Gamora with this new Gamora, because he just wants to reconnect with something. But it's ultimately by the end when he has to realize you can't build something new by trying to just replace it. You have to essentially build on what's already there. And he has family, he just needs to connect with them. So I like that. I like it's nice. Speaking of Gamora, I love her character arc throughout the movie too. It's subtle in a way, but what I do like is that while she doesn't join the Guardians by the end of the movie and is still content to be with the Ravagers, little by little throughout the movie, she sees what drew her main universe or main timeline counterpart to this group. She sees the familiarity, the camaraderie, and while she never engaged with it because she still barely knows these people, when she sees it from a distance, she does start to there's a part of her that clearly longs for that. When she rooted through Peter's stuff at one point in the movie, she found a picture of Peter with his mom and mom and grandpa. You can tell she was a little envious of that. And even when she was guarding the ship, she found Rocket when he was lying in the medical bay and even said, "You must be very loyal for them to go through all this trouble for you." And ultimately, while she was the one that was advocating for continually turning Rocket over to the High Evolutionary, when one of the High Evolutionary's pets comes knocking at the door and wants Rocket to be handed over, she defends him. She could easily just hand him over and save her own skin, but no, she defends him and wants to help out. And we even see that she has her own limits when it comes to these things. As when the High Evolutionary decided to raise Counter-Earth, even she was horrified by that. And by the end of the film, when she got the chance to just stab the guy in the back, she clearly enjoyed it, so again, I like that. And again, another thing I like is that when she sees Peter's heart, when she sees how desperately he's fighting to protect the people he loves, she starts to see what initially attracted her counterpart to him. When she sees him desperately trying to wake Rocket up, she tries to talk to him and say, "Look, come on, stop, he's dead." And he's like, "No, I'm not giving up, I'm not losing another person, not again, not again." And she sees the heart. And it's part of the reason why I think by the end of the movie, she starts to actually feel something for him. Yes, it doesn't bloom at anything bigger, but she starts to realize she starts to understand why her counterpart was attracted to Peter in the first place. What drew her to him? Because underneath the idiocy, underneath the stupidity, underneath the fake bravado, as I said, there was the heart of a good man who wanted to help his friends. And when she saw that, it did touch her, and it made her longing. And by the end of the film, when she says, "I bet we were fun," yeah, it's clear that I bet we were fun. It's clear that now she kind of wished she had that life, that she had gotten the chance to know this guy, which is kind of tragic in a sense, because that's another reason why she probably could be as distant as she is, because she's seeing the life she could have had if things had just continued on the pre-appointed path. If Thanos didn't jump into the future, if he didn't intercept Nebula from the future, she would have still, basically, if things had been different, this could have been her life. These are the people that she could have called friends, and it's clear that in a way, she feels longing for that, but ultimately, she has her own family. She has her own life. It's why by the end of the movie, she still affirms to Peter, I'm still not the person you think I am. Because, yeah, she's changed a little bit, but she hasn't. But she's changed. But she still wouldn't call the Guardians her family. She's not. She's not willing to accept them as family. But at the same time, she understands why in another life they would have been her family. I like that. It's nice. I do like that bit of development. And by the end, when she does rejoin the Ravagers and they all just join in for her for a group hug, that's just its own brand of sweet too. So I like it. Oh, that's good. But another little bit of character stuff that I do like, the stuff with Rocket. Rocket is I love the film. I love that the film finally gets more into his backstory, and it's a tragic one. When I like seeing Rocket, like yeah, first it's just horrific seeing Rocket be experimented on like this from a young age. But to see that in under this, he had friends and family. All of them had hopes and dreams for what they wanted in the future, only to have them be cut down. It's just sad. And the scene when when Rocket finally when Rocket's connecting with them and just they're playing games, just talking and all expressing what they want to do when they go to the new world. It's just nice and sweet and seeing their camaraderie. But the thing is, we know that these people don't exist in the present day. So you know something has to have happened to them. You don't know what, but something. And when we see them finally get killed off, it's genuinely horrifying. And especially in the case with Lila, because she was freed from her cage and she and Rocket finally got the chance to hug. Like I mentioned, Rocket was kept in a separate cage from Lila, so there was always like a literal wall between them. So for the chance for them to finally embrace and hug, and it's very sweet. But just as Lila says it's good to have friends, she gets blasted. She gets shot in the back by the High Evolutionary, and as Teefs and Floor just start freaking out and tell Rocket we need to go right now, Rocket is just in too much grief. And I love the acting in that scene. It's just the way Rocket is expressing it. The way he's yelling and you can hear the anguish and anger in his voice at seeing one of his closest friends just gunned down right in front of him, all because she was a failed experiment. You can just sense it and it breaks your heart. It's fucking sad. And it's kind of going off of that note, the scene when Rocket has his near-death experience and sees Teefs, Floor, and Lila in the afterlife, it tugs at your heartstrings, man. Like, I admit, when I went to go see it before this vlog, I almost cried. I almost cried at that scene. It was fucking sad, man. Especially the way that Rocket was just apologizing and on the brink of tears as he was talking to Lila. It's just fucking sad. But kind of on that same token, it's by finally being able to face the High Evolutionary and having that dream that allows Rocket to finally move on with it. And it's kind of spiritually showcased when Rocket finally is willing to accept that he's a raccoon, especially when he actually sees raccoons, and is finally able to get some sweet justice on the High Evolutionary by just smashing in the face and reaffirming that he isn't some experiment designated with a serial number. He's Rocket Raccoon and he's a guardian of the galaxy. And it's cathartic, kicks ass, and very emotional. And by the end, you do feel like he's earned his spot as the leader of the Guardians, as he's dealt with a lot of shit. And I do kind of like how they build up to it in the movie, as the opening actually has him in charge of the Zune and playing the music over Nowhere speakers, and the way he's walking around does kind of give him the air of he's the one in charge now. So I like how they hint in that regard. So I dig that. And I'm trying to think of what other characters got their own share of development in this movie. I listed Peter, I listed Gamora, I listed Rocket. Who else? If I had to give any more development, maybe well, I think the other real development for the movie was with Drax, and Mantis, and Nebula, but their character development was a lot lesser. Let me put it this way: Rocket, Peter, and Gamora got the lion's share of character development in the movie, which, as a result, a flaw with the movie I can find is that while the other Guardians definitely have moments where they try to shine, they are kind of pushed out of the limelight. Again, it's not like to the point where they're forgotten, as they do have their own little moments of character, moments of character development and character interactions that I think work, but it does still feel like they don't get as much attention as they should. But that said, they do still get some bit of attention, as Mantis does talk about how how, because at one point, let's going back to when Mantis, Nebula, and Drax infiltrated the High Evolutionary ship. Nebula yells at Drax how he could have killed them and how he's an idiot who knows how to hit things. But Mantis defends him, saying, "So what if he's an idiot? He makes us laugh, and he at least has a heart, and isn't just being a judgmental bitch like you." Which does get Drax angry because Mantis called him an idiot, or doesn't make him angry. It makes him sad that Mantis called him an idiot. But at the very least, it shows how much she does still value him. And and ultimately, while he is essentially an idiot, he's ultimately a good person, and she does trust him, and he does do his share, and does have good qualities. So I dig it. Although again, when it kind of talking on Mantis's development, I don't really know how that really went. She didn't get a lot of moments. Most of her moments are in relation to trying to support Peter, which makes sense considering that they are actual literal siblings. It just still doesn't feel like it was as fully utilized as it should. And and while I do like her final decision where she decides to just go off and do her own thing, taking the 3 obelisks with her, which is actually kind of awesome, it doesn't feel as built up to as it doesn't really feel like it has a lot of build up to it. Again, not a bad ending for her. I do like that she's essentially decided to go, I want to find my own place in the world, so I dig it. I like that. It does offer new avenues for her to explore in the future if they wish to go down that route. But ultimately, I think it's a nice capstone for her character. Felt like it could have been built up better. Same goes for Nebula and Drax. They don't get a lot of moments together either. Nebula is mostly just impatient and angry, and we don't the only real meet. And while we do see that she has gotten development in this movie, even throughout the movie, she is caring about the rest of the Guardians. She's still standoffish and rude, and very much and she's as much of a bitch in this movie as she was in the previous films, minus the whole working with the bad guys thing. But it's very clear that the time that she's spent with the Guardians, and especially with Rocket, has softened her up somewhat. She's willing to defend the Guardians when push comes to shove. She's ready to support them. She's ready to help them. She's ready to help them out when the need arises. She's more willing to connect with Gamora, even though this Gamora is more standoffish. And when Gamora suggested that they just hand Rocket over, she's one of the people that says, no, he's family, we're not just gonna throw him to the wolves. Especially when she learns when Rocket wakes back up. Again, the bit of acting from Karen Gillan in that scene is perfect. You can just feel Nebula's heart melting as she realizes Rocket's going to be okay, which makes sense considering that for 5 years, Nebula and Rocket were the only surviving members of the Guardians. So it makes sense why she would be more concerned about anybody than that with Rocket's safety. And yet at the same time, she is still concerned about the rest of the group and wants to help them and help and get through everything. And it's nice, and I like seeing that. It's just that the bit of development with her and Drax doesn't feel, again, as built up to. Though again, with Drax, but again, it's not bad. There are still the moments there, and you do see how she reached the conclusion. And just again, it feels like it should have had more time to it. With that being said, I do kind of like that she's essentially trying to, by the end of the movie, she wants to try and soften herself up to build a new society for Nowhere, and she wants Drax's help because she did see a side of him that she hadn't seen before, namely his fatherly nurturing, as he talked to the kids and treated them like kids, actually being patient with them, being fun with them, being goofing off. As when Nebula tried warning them to stay away from the hull, she was yelling at them and saying calling them little idiots, and as a result, Drax had to calm down by making animal noises and just being silly and fun. It's, again, I like that little bit of, again, it's good development. I just wish we had more of it, is what I'm saying. But either way, I do at least like where the Guardians end up by the end of the movie. And while, yes, the original team essentially is disbanded by the end, the Guardians are still around, and we do get some new members. So I dig that. But if I have to list other flaws with the movie, sadly, it's not just Drax, Gamora, and Nebula Drax, Mantis, and Nebula, who kind of get pushed aside when it comes to character development. Sadly, other characters get similar treatment. So specifically, Adam Warlock. You might notice that I had to keep kind of essentially shoehorning him into my plot summary, and that's because I kept forgetting this guy was in the movie. Well, he's the guy that jump-started the plot for the movie, as he's the one that attacked Nowhere and critically injured Rocket. After that point, he's an afterthought. The major threat from there on out is the High Evolutionary, as he continuously tries to impede the Guardians in their way of trying to heal Rocket. But likewise, Adam Warlock and his mother, They're not important. Sorry. They're not important. They don't do anything. They're just always trailing behind the Guardians, not really being able to keep up with them. And the few times they do catch up to them, the amount of stuff they do is so inconsequential that you could just take it out of the movie. When Adam saves Gamora from Warpig, it could have easily just had Gamora take down Warpig herself and then try to escape and see what was going on with Counter Earth, and then deciding, oh, we gotta get out of here. Or when Adam Warlock briefly attacked the Guardians while they were dealing with the Hell Beasts or whatever, or Hellspawn. Yeah, that's what they were called. The Hellspawn that the High Evolutionary unleashed. That could have been cut from the movie. Even the final scene with Peter, again, was just kind of unnecessary. You could have had any of the Guardians go to save him. Or hell, Peter could have had his stupid mask. Where was that? Did he just ditch it, throw it to the wolves, or did he just forget he had it? I don't understand that. Why didn't he have it? Isn't that like the Star Wars? Isn't the mask supposed to be his thing as Star-Lord? I don't get it. It was weird, and it was just weird. I don't understand why he didn't have it. Again, that's a minor nitpick, but still. Ultimately, I feel like Adam Warlock was just mostly shoehorned into the story. He had his own share of development, as essentially this film was supposed to be like a superhero origin story. He was woken up from his cage, told to do something, and he did it faithfully. But ultimately, it was him just trying to find his own way, and ultimately he was just a child. He was learning, and he had a good heart. He was naive and strange, but he didn't fit. But he ultimately kind of broke away from what the sovereign race was supposed to be. Basically, just inclusive and being just basically exclusive and trying to keep everybody out, thinking that they were the best of the best, whereas Adam Warlock was actually trying to open his heart to others and was actually, well-spoken. While I felt his presence in the movie was actually unnecessary, he was very much well-spoken and outgoing and actually was very polite, even to the people he was fighting. It's clear that he wasn't doing it he wasn't hurting people out of a sense of maliciousness. It was more like, I was told to do this, so I gotta do it. Sorry about this. So I get where they were going for with that, and by the end, I do like that he eventually does make the choice to decide, I want to be good, and these people giving me a second chance, so I'm going to try and take advantage of that. So I like that, and it's clear the film is trying to set him up for later films. I just wish he had more to do with the plot, is what I'm saying. Again, not going to blame his actor. I love the makeup they use for him. It actually does look really cool, and I like seeing him in action when he is doing stuff. It's just that I think he needed more time to sit. It's just that, like his mother said, he needed more time to stew, so again, kind of giving that as another flaw. And if I have to give another flaw, sadly, I also gotta dock points with a High Evolutionary. This guy was an annoying, whiny idiot. Basically, his whole shtick is that he had a god complex. That he was brilliant. Except he was brilliant. He was hot. He had this grand design for the universe. He was an annoying little twit. He was whiny. He was complaining. He couldn't stand the idea of someone being better than him. It's one of the reasons why he was going after Rocket, especially since Rocket was his creation, and a failed creation at that. He couldn't stand the fact that Rocket was better, and he was obsessed with him because he thought, oh, if this timid little creature could learn and grow, then that needs to be applied to the actual successes. The dude was just annoying. The arrogance, the way he talked down to everybody, thought that he was more important than you, that he felt that if you weren't perfect, you could be raised. Basically, he only tolerated his creations if they did what he wanted or didn't break out of their pre-established parameters, which, yeah, that ain't a god. That's not really a god that I would want to follow. The dude was just, he was annoying. He was aggravating, and essentially, I'll give him credit. I'll give the film credit. They did make you want to punch this guy in the face, but it wasn't really for all the evil acts he was doing. It was because he was so friggin' annoying, and it was like you gave power to a whiny, petulant little child. It's part of the reason why his beatdown at the end was so cathartic, because at that point he was just still yelling, complaining, saying, you think you're better than me? You think you are something? You're not anything. You are a failed experiment. Just shut the hell up, dude. I'm not gonna give crap to his actor. He actually did a good job with the material he was given. Definitely portrayed him as the whiny, arrogant SOB that he was, but again, he was just friggin' annoying. Yeah, I am gonna dock points for that. You hated him, but not for the reasons you think you're supposed to hate him. So I'll give you that. So I'm gonna continue docking points for that. But and speaking of which, Kraglin. I kept forgetting this guy. Again, I'm sorry I kept forgetting this guy in the movie, but he served no purpose in the movie. He was just there to pilot nowhere, and the only bit of character development he had was learning to control Yondu's fin, and that was mostly just him having a vision of Yondu telling him to use his heart, which... That's dumb advice, my man. That's dumb advice, but I guess it works. Plus, he also had a clash with Cosmo when he called her a bad dog, so... But... if I have to give more praise to the movie, and what still makes me like it is, for one thing, going off the character interactions, the acting all around was phenomenal. You can really feel the pain on these characters' faces when they have to confront their past traumas and have to try and move on. You can tell how much of a painful process it is. Sorry. To have to actually deal with this trauma and try and move forward with it. But it's something that all of them have to do in some regard. Peter with Gamora and having to find a new place for himself. With Rocket when he has to confront the High Evolutionary, which I love the CGI work on Rocket, especially when he hears the High Evolutionary's voice again. Like, it's like he's just like he's groggy after having gotten woken up and healed, but then he hears the High Evolutionary's voice and you can just see a look of horror on his face. And especially going off the High Evolutionary being a good actor, you can just see the exact moment that he just started loathing Rocket when Rocket found something that he'd missed, as he just went, huh. Like, you could just see the anger, and you could tell that part of the reason why they even instituted it in the first place was because he thought it would fail, and he just wanted to show it to Rocket, saying, "Oh, we did that, but it didn't work. You still gotta learn." And the fact that it did work, it made him mad. It made him mad. Again, the acting all around is brilliant. The actors really do capture the emotions that these characters are going through, the pain each of them has from having to deal with their traumas and have to move on. I love the scene when they get emotional. It's nice when Peter is losing his shit over having to potentially over almost losing Rocket. You can feel the sorrow and you can hear the sorrow in his voice, and it's sad, but it's. At the same time, when everything feels lighter, it feels more joyful, more happy, more sweet. Just finally seeing these characters actually earn their happy ending. It's nice stuff, and I dig it. It's really nice, and I just like watching it. And speaking of watching things, the action is just fucking awesome. I love the fight scenes in this movie. They're all so well coordinated and flashy and nice, mixing together all these high dynamic superhero antics with some quick cuts, flashing and nice acrobatics and tightly yeah, the fight scenes are more tightly packed, but they make up for it with how dynamic all the characters move, how coordinated they are. The fight scene, like when Peter and Groot start shooting down the High Evolutionary scientist and they're moving around just keeping pace with one another, and when to the fucking hallway scene, which is just so cool as you see all the Guardians just coordinating with one another as they go down the hall and take out more of the High Evolutionary's guards. It's just so freaking cool. And again, the final beatdown of the High Evolutionary, superb. I loved it. It was just fantastic. It was great. So again, that's another great thing. Fight scenes were fantastic. I might dock some points maybe for some creativity in the worlds, but I will still say they were very nice and intricate and nicely laid out. And I especially like this. Hold on, I'm gonna look at my final thoughts too, because I did kind of itemize these as well. On top, I guess I like this because I mentioned it twice. Another thing I like, the fucking humor. This movie is legitimately funny. And the best part of it, because they have great one-liners and zingers that make fun of their certain situations, make fun of certain character quirks or just little mess-ups here and there. The humor is actually well placed, and all the humor is fitting with each of the characters. None of it feels forced. All of it feels like it's natural to the movie, and all of it just keeps things moving along. Like when the group want to breaking into Corp. I keep forgetting that name. And they break into Corp and they accidentally jettison their spacesuits. And so when you see it, you can see it's when Peter is talking down the guards, and as they're talking, you can see the suits just flying by in the background. And Mantis clearly sees them, but she has to keep her mouth shut lest she blow their cover. And then as they're out, that's when she has to tell them they're out in space. That's funny. Or even some little character moments. Like there's one scene in the movie where they call back to the holiday special, and in the holiday special there was a running gag on Drax being angry at Mantis for eating all these nuts that he had stored, and for her to just tell him to let it go. Well, what happens in this movie as he's eating the nuts? Drax offers one to Peter, and as they're taking the elevator, Mantis is like, maybe I wanted one, and Drax is like, I'm sorry, I'm all out. She just, as he takes another one and eats it, like it's just, it's funny, and the humor comes from just how well these characters work off of each other. They know what gets under the other people's skin, but they always just like to do little pokes and jabs because of it. They can get annoyed at certain things, but at the end of the day, that's what makes these characters endearing to one another as well. And I love seeing that. The humor feels natural because of that. None of it feels forced or ingratiated. Which further makes it feel like these people are a family. That they're not just a team of people that are out there trying to kick ass. They're a family they're a family that sticks together through thick and thin, and I love it. It's just nice. So, overall, I think the film is awesome. It feels like it very much takes what was built with the first two Guardians movies and expands on it. The character interaction is brilliant. Every character gets some form of development, from big stuff to little stuff. I love how everybody grows in how the characters grow in every regard. And I love seeing where they end up and how they get there. The character interaction feels superb, showcasing just how much these people have been through together and how it's to help kind of forge the fires of their friendship and family. I love the action. It kicks ass. The acting is just great all around. I love the humor and how well it works. If I have to list any problems, it's again, villain feels pretty standard for the movie. There are some characters that I felt could have had more development and really and could have had more time in the sun. Plus, there were some little moments here and there that made me go, that's not right. That doesn't make sense. Again, like going with the helmet thing. But overall, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is an amazing movie and a perfect capstone for the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. If you have not seen it yet, and if you've made it to the end of this 2-hour-long video, then I highly recommend it. It is very much worth your time and is a perfect finale to the Guardians of the Galaxy films. So, yeah, that's about all I can say. So, yeah. Again, if you made it to the end of the 2-hour mark, I thank you. And, yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. I hope you have a good evening. And while next week we'll be going back to Steven Universe, the next time we venture back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think it's time we check back in with Captain Marvel, and I finally get an excuse to watch both the Miss Marvel series on Disney Plus and that new Secret Invasion series is going to be coming out next month. So, yeah, next time we meet, I'll get all that stuff under my belt as we take a look at the Captain Marvel sequel that I don't know how many people have been asking for, The Marvels.